The village of Black Hollow was filled with joy. Candles flickered and music played as people danced at the grand wedding of Eleanor and Thomas. Eleanor, the beautiful bride, smiled in her white gown, holding Thomas's hand. But as the clock struck midnight, a strange chill filled the air. The candles flickered wildly, a loud gasp spread through the crowd. When the lights steadied, Eleanor was gone. The guests searched for her, calling her name, but she had vanished without a trace. Thomas's heart pounded as he searched the hall. "Eleanor!" he shouted, his voice shaking. The guests looked under tables, behind curtains, and even outside, but she was nowhere to be found. Her bouquet lay on the floor, the petals scattered everywhere. The villagers whispered amongst themselves. Had she run away? Or had something taken her away? Then a strong wind blew the doors open. Outside, the full moon shone brightly, revealing a single footprint in the mud, Eleanor's, but there was only one. The villagers followed the footprints to the edge of the forest. She couldn't have gone in there, an old man said, shivering. No one enters that forest comes back. Thomas didn't care. He grabbed a lantern and ran inside. The trees whispered, their branches bending like arms reaching for him. Shadows danced, and the sound of rustling leaves filled the air. Eleanor, he called again. Then he saw it. A piece of her wedding veil caught on a thorny bush. Thomas yanked the veil free and held it close. His breath turned to mist as the air grew colder. Suddenly, a loud snap echoed through the trees. He turned, his lantern shaking in his hands. A shadow darted behind the trees. "Who is there?" he demanded. Silence, then a soft sob. He rushed towards the sound and found Eleanor's pearl necklace hanging from a branch. His chest tightened. She had been here, but where was she now? And who had taken her? The trees rustled again, and Thomas saw something move between them. He chased after it, dodging roots and branches. His foot caught on a vine and he stumbled forward, his lantern crashing to the ground. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the trees. Then a whisper. "Thomas!" It was Eleanor's voice. He scrambled to his feet. "Eleanor, where are you?" he cried. But instead of an answer, the whisper turned into a soft, haunting laugh. The laugh sent chills down Thomas's spine. It was Eleanor's voice, but it was strange. It sounded very strange, like an echo from deep within the earth. He spun around, searching for her, his heart hammering. Then he saw something, a white figure, standing between two trees. "Eleanor," he whispered. He ran towards her, but as he reached out, she vanished like mist. His fingers touched nothing but air. His breath came in quick gasps. Was he losing his mind? Determined, Thomas pushed forward. He followed the faint scent of Eleanor's perfume, drifting through the trees like a ghostly guide. The forest seemed alive, whispering, shifting. Then he saw a small wooden cabin ahead, its windows glowing with a dim, airy light. He hesitated. Who lived there? Could Eleanor be inside? Gathering his courage, he crept to the door and knocked. The door creaked open by itself. He stepped in, his heart pounding. The room was empty, except for a single white shoe. Thomas picked up the shoe. It was Eleanor's. His pulse raced as he scanned the room. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and dust covered the wooden floor. The only light came from a flickering candle on a small table. Then he heard it. a faint tapping sound. He turned sharply. A wardrobe stood in the corner, its door slightly open. The tapping came from inside. Swallowing his fear, Thomas stepped closer. His hand trembled as he pulled the door open. Inside the wardrobe, nothing but darkness stared back at him. But the tapping sound continued, growing louder. Thomas leaned in, trying to see. Suddenly, a hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. He yelped, stumbling backwards. The hand disappeared into the shadows. The wardrobe slammed shut on its own. The tapping sound stopped. His breath came in ragged gasps. Something was in there, and it had touched him. But was it Eleanor or something else? Thomas backed away from the wardrobe. Then the candle blew out, plunging the room into darkness. A cold breeze brushed against his face. A whisper right by his ear. Help me. It was Eleanor. He fumbled for the lantern, relighting it with shaky hands. The wardrobe door creaked open again, slowly. This time Thomas saw a staircase leading down into the floor. His stomach tightened. Was this where Eleanor had gone? Gritting his teeth, he took the first step down. Thomas descended the narrow staircase, his lantern flickering with each step. The air grew damp, smelling of earth and something rotten. His boots echoed against the stone floor. At the bottom, he found a tunnel stretching into darkness. Eleanor, he called, his voice swallowed by the shadows. Then he saw them, scratch marks on the walls, deep and jagged, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. His heart pounded. Had Eleanor been trapped there? If so, by what? Thomas moved deeper into the tunnel, the silence pressing against him. The walls dripped with moisture and the air grew colder. Then ahead he spotted a torn piece of Eleanor's gown, stuck to a jagged rock. He rushed forward, grabbing it with trembling fingers. She was here, he whispered, but as he turned, something skittered behind him. A quick scratching sound. He whipped around, raising the lantern. Shadows danced wildly. Who is there? He demanded, but the tunnel remained silent. A soft whisper drifted through the tunnel. Thomas! He spun, his breath catching in his throat. The voice was close, too close. He lifted the lantern, and for a brief second, he saw a face in the darkness. Pale, hollow eyes, lips frozen in a silent scream. Then it vanished. Thomas stumbled back, his pulse roaring into his ears. Eleanor, he gasped. No answer, only the airy drip of water echoing through the tunnel. Whatever was down here, it wasn't alone. Thomas pressed on, gripping the lantern tight. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading him deeper underground. Then a faint glow appeared ahead. He hurried towards it and stepped into a large chamber. A single candle burned on a stone table, casting flickering shadows. Chains hung from the walls, and in the center of the room, a tall mirror stood covered in dust. Thomas stepped closer, peering at his reflection. Then his blood ran cold, because Eleanor was standing behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. His breathing turned ragged. He turned back to the mirror. Eleanor was still there, her eyes pleading. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Thomas pressed his hand against the glass. Eleanor, I'm here. The moment his fingers touched the surface, an icy force yanked him forward. He gasped as he fell through, tumbling into darkness. The lantern slipped from his grasp, Cold hands pulled at him, whispering. When Thomas opened his eyes, he was somewhere else. A grand ballroom stretched before him, filled with people dressed in old-fashioned clothes. Music played, but it sounded warped and eerie. The dancers moved stiffly, their faces hidden behind a mask. Then, at the center of the room, he saw her, Eleanor. She stood frozen in her wedding gown, her hands clasped together. Eleanor, he shouted, running towards her. But as he reached out, the music stopped. The dancers turned, and their eyes were hollow. Thomas's breath hitched. The masked figures stared at him, their heads tilting unnaturally. Then, all at once, they began moving towards him. Their steps were slow, deliberate. He grabbed Eleanor's hands. Eleanor, wake up. Her skin was ice cold. Her lips barely moved. Thomas, run! He shook his head. Not without you. The figures closed in, whispering his name. The air turned thick, suffocating. A sharp pain shot through his head. The last thing he saw was the glint of a mask before everything went dark. When Thomas woke, he was alone. The ballroom had vanished. He was lying on a cold stone floor, his head pounding. Eleanor was gone. He scrambled to his feet, searching wildly. Then a voice echoed around him. She is ours now. Thomas turned, his fist clenched. Who are you? The shadows around him shifted. A figure emerged, tall, cloaked in black, its face hidden. Leave, it whispered, or stay and be lost forever. Thomas lifted his chin. I'm not leaving without my wife. The cloaked figure chuckled, a deep hollow sound. Then you must play our game. With a wave of its hand, the ground trembled. Thomas staggered as the floor split open, revealing a spiraling staircase leading down into the unknown. If you want her, the figure said, you must follow. Thomas took a deep breath. Fear clawed at him, but he refused to turn back. He stepped onto the first stair. The moment he did, the figure vanished, and the staircase collapsed behind him. There was no turning back now. Thomas hurried down the stairs, his footsteps echoing. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Finally, he reached the door. He pushed it open and gasped. He was back in the church, the very place he married Eleanor. But something was wrong. The pews were filled with shadowy figures. The priest stood at the altar, his face shrouded in darkness, and Eleanor stood beside him, her eyes empty. You're too late, the priest whispered. Thomas's heart pounded. No, he shouted, running towards Eleanor. But his feet wouldn't move. It was as if the floor had turned to tar, holding him in place. The priest lifted a bony hand. She belongs to the shadow now, he intoned. The shadowy figures in the pews whispered in unison, their voices like rustling leaves. Eleanor turned her head slowly. Thomas, she whispered, tears in her eyes. He struggled against the unseen force, fighting to reach her. Summoning all his strength, Thomas broke free. He lunged towards Eleanor, grabbing her hands. Her skin was as cold as ice. Eleanor, we are leaving, he cried. But the priest's voice boomed. You cannot take what has already been claimed. The candles flickered wildly, and the shadows rose from the pews, swelling like a storm. Eleanor clung to Thomas. Don't let go, she pleaded. The shadows longed. Thomas braced himself, holding her tight as darkness swallowed them both. For a moment there was nothing, just endless suffocating darkness. Then a voice, low and ancient, echoed through the void. You dare challenge the shadow? Thomas couldn't see where it came from. He only felt its presence, immense and watching. He tightened his grip on Eleanor. She is my wife, he said firmly. You can't have her. A slow chilling laugh filled the air. Then prove your words, the voice commanded. Suddenly the ground beneath them gave way and they were falling. Thomas and Eleanor crashed onto the cold stone floor, gasping. Thomas looked around. They were in a massive cavern, torches lining the walls. At the far end stood a great iron door. Eleanor gripped his hand. Thomas, I remember now. The legend. The shadow takes bride at midnight, trapping them in this world. He turns to her, his eyes blazing. Then we break the legend. A deep growl rumbled through the cavern. The shadows thickened, forming a monstrous shape. A towering figure emerged from the darkness, its body shifting like smoke, its eyes burning red. Face the trial, it hissed. The iron door creaked open, revealing three paths. Only one leads to freedom. The creature rasped. Thomas swallowed hard. Eleanor squeezed his hand. We choose together. The creature's laugh echoed. Choose wisely or be lost forever. The torches flickered wildly as the three paths stretched before them. Each was shrouded in mist, hiding what they lay beyond. Thomas studied the three paths. One smelled of roses, the second of fire, and the third of the ocean. He glanced at Eleanor. Do you remember anything from the legend? She frowned, deep in thought. The shadow is bound to fear. It only thrives where fear lives. Thomas nodded. Then we take the path that leads away from fear. He grabbed her hand and they stepped into the path that smelled of roses. The cavern rumbled behind them and the shadows screeched in rage. The path twisted and turned, the scent of roses growing stronger. Then suddenly the walls closed in, forming a narrow tunnel. Keep moving, Thomas urged. They ran, their footsteps echoing. But then a whisper. You chose wrong. Cold fingers brushed Thomas's neck. He spun, but no one was there. The tunnel began to collapse. Run, he shouted, pulling Eleanor forward. They sprinted as rocks stumbled behind them. Just as the tunnel curved in, they leaped through an opening and landed in a moonlight garden. The garden was eerily silent. White roses bloomed all around them, their petals glowing in the dim light. Eleanor gasped. This was my childhood garden. Thomas was surprised. But how? A voice echoed through the air. The shadow feeds on memories. Eleanor shuddered. It's trying to trap me. Thomas grabbed her shoulders. This isn't real. We have to keep going. Then a soft giggle filled the air. A little girl stepped from behind a rose bush. Eleanor's eyes widened. That's me. The young Eleanor stared at them, tilting her head. Why are you here? She asked. Her voice was sweet but distant, like an echo from long ago. Eleanor stepped forward. We are trying to escape. The girl shook her head. You can't. The shadow owns us now. Thomas clenched his fist. That's not true. The little girl frowned. Then prove it. She pointed behind them. They turned and saw the shadow rising from the roses, its monstrous form stretching forward to them. The garden twisted into darkness as the shadow loomed over them. No one leaves, it sneered. Thomas stood in front of Eleanor. You don't own her, he said. The shadow's laughter was like breaking a glass. She was promised. Eleanor's eyes widened. Promised? By who? The shadow circled them. Long ago, a debt was made. A bride of the darkness every 100 years. Eleanor gasped. My family? The shadow's voice was cold. And now it is your turn. Thomas clenched his jaw. No, she is not yours. He grabbed Eleanor's hand. We make our own fate. The shadow hissed. Then face your end. The darkness swelled, rushing towards them. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. I remember the legend, she whispered. The shadow is bound to fear, but also to its promise. Thomas understood. Then we break it. He turned to the shadow. You were promised a bride. You were never promised this bride. The darkness hesitated. The shadow writhed, its form flickering. A promise cannot be undone. Eleanor stepped forward. A promise can be rewritten, she said firmly. I am not afraid of you. The shadow screeched. Lies! It longed, but its body began to crumble. Thomas grabbed Eleanor's hand. We end this. The garden began to shatter, lights breaking through the darkness. The shadow let out a final deafening scream as it dissolved into mist. The world twisted and then everything went silent. Thomas and Eleanor found themselves back at the wedding hall. The guests were still frozen in time, as if nothing had happened. The clock struck 12 midnight. Eleanor gasped. Did we win? Thomas held her close. We are home. The doors of the hall burst open and the villagers gasped as they saw them standing there. Eleanor, someone cried. The spell was broken. The whispers were gone, but something lingered in the air, a faint shadow watching from the corner. The wedding resumed, though some guests remained uneasy. Eleanor and Thomas held hands, exchanging vows. The priest smiled, unaware of what had happened. But as Eleanor placed the ring on Thomas's finger, she shivered. Do you feel that? She whispered. Thomas nodded. The air was colder. The candles flickered again. The shadows was gone, but not forgotten. As the villagers cheered for the couple, a single black rose lay on the altar, its petals dripping with ink-like darkness. That night, Thomas and Eleanor left the village. They couldn't stay, not with the memory of the shadow lurking behind them. As they rode away, Eleanor looked back at Black Hollow. The village was safe. The legend was broken. But deep down, she knew the shadow would always wait. In another 100 years, it would return seeking a new bride. Thomas squeezed her hand. We changed fate once, he said. If it comes back, someone else will too. Eleanor smiled. Let's hope they are stubborn as us. The wind carried their laughter as they disappeared into the night. In the distance, the clock tower chimed once more. Midnight had passed, and for the first time in centuries, the shadow remained silent. But in the deepest part of the forest, where the moonlight never reached, something shifted. A whisper rose from the darkness. One day the legend had ended, but in the heart of Black Hollow, where old stories never truly die, a new one was just beginning. As Thomas and Eleanor rode away, the village of Black Hollow faded behind them. The road stretched ahead, winding through darkened hills. Eleanor rested her head on Thomas's shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Do you think it's really over? She murmured. Thomas pressed a kiss to her forehead. I hope so. But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. That night was too quiet, the stars too distant. The shadow had vanished, or had it? Miles away, deep within the forbidden forest, the air grew thick with mist. The old wooden cabin stood silent. The door still creaked from Thomas's touch. Then, without warning, the mirror inside the cabin shimmered. The surface rippled like water. A hand, long, thin, inky black, pressed against the glass. A low, hollow whisper filled the empty room. A promise cannot be erased. The hand slowly withdrew, and the mirror darkened once more. The shadow was waiting, watching, and one day it would rise again. Back on the road, Eleanor stared, sensing the shift in the air. Something is wrong, she whispered. Thomas tightened his grip on the reins. We are safe now, he assured her. But even as he spoke, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint echoes of laughter. Eleanor looked back one last time. In the distance, far beyond the hills, the church bells of Black Hollow tolled once again. Midnight had passed, but somewhere in the world, the shadow had already begun searching for its next bride. Thomas and Eleanor never returned to Black Hollow. They settled in a quiet town far from the cursed village. They grew old together, their love unshaken by the horrors of that night. But sometimes, in the stillness of midnight, Eleanor would wake, her heart pounding, as if something was calling her name. And in the darkness, Thomas would hold her close, whispering, It's just a dream. But deep down, they both knew the truth. Some stories never end, some shadows never fade. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to this point, please give this video a thumbs up. It will help grow my small YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, do well to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I post more interesting content like this. Please do well to leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on this video. See you guys in my next video. Bye. But deep down, they both knew the truth. Some stories never end, some shadows never fade.